The courtyard was alive with its usual late afternoon chaos. Basketballs bounced rhythmically against the cracked pavement, sneakers squeaked across the court, and students clustered in circles, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't that funny. The air buzzed with gossip. About teachers, about who was dating who, about who had embarrassed themselves in class that morning. But that day, all those threads of chatter kept drifting back to one person, the new girl. She had arrived at the school barely a week ago, slipping into the hallways like a ghost. She didn't talk much, kept her gaze fixed on the floor, and when called on in class, her answers were clipped and efficient, as if she wanted to finish speaking as quickly as possible. She wasn't rude, but she didn't invite anyone in either. In a place where cliques had already carved up the social territory, her silence marked her as an outsider. And outsiders always drew attention, the wrong kind. From the first day, the bullies noticed her. They were the kind of kids who fed on weakness, who prowled for anyone who looked different, uncertain, or alone. The leader, a tall boy with a permanent smirk plastered on his face, nudged his friends in the cafeteria when she passed by, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. Look at her, walking like she owns the place, but too scared to talk. His crew laughed, and the girl kept walking, her tray steady in her hands, her face unreadable. That reaction only made them hungrier. Ignoring them wasn't what they wanted. They wanted fear, stammers, apologies. To them, she looked like the perfect target. They tested her in small ways first. A shoulder bump in the hallway. A muttered insult when teachers weren't listening. A shove at the lockers, followed by exaggerated apologies laced with sarcasm. Every time, she just picked herself up and walked on, silent, composed, never giving them the satisfaction of a response. To the bullies, that wasn't resilience, it was weakness. And weakness meant opportunity. By the end of the week, they had decided to go bigger. The courtyard after school was their stage, and with so many students hanging around waiting for rides or practice, the timing was perfect. The bullies didn't just want to pick on her, they wanted an audience. That afternoon, the girl walked across the courtyard with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her head slightly bowed. She wasn't in a hurry, but her stride was purposeful, like she was simply focused on getting home. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground, making the courtyard feel like a stage lit for drama. The bullies saw her, exchanged grins, and moved into position. The leader stepped forward first, swaggering across her path so abruptly that she almost bumped into him. His two friends flanked him like bodyguards, one crossing his arms, the other cracking his knuckles for effect. "Hey, new girl," the leader drawled, his smirk widening. "Going somewhere in a rush? You don't even stop to say hi to anyone. That's not very friendly." The girl lifted her eyes to meet his for the briefest moment, then shifted her gaze to the side as if he were barely worth acknowledging. That tiny flicker of defiance made him bristle. He grabbed the strap of her backpack, yanking it slightly to pull her closer. "I asked you a question. You got something in here you're hiding. Money, snacks, secrets." His voice grew louder, designed to draw attention. And it worked. The students around them began to notice. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. A circle began to form, kids shuffling closer, sensing a show was about to unfold. Phones appeared in hands, cameras already recording. The bullies thrived on this kind of spotlight. It wasn't enough to scare someone in private. They wanted the spectacle, the laughter, the validation. The leader's friends chuckled, adding their taunts. "She's probably too scared to say anything," one said. "Bet she's never stood up for herself in her life." The girl remained still, her face unreadable. She didn't plead, didn't beg, didn't even try to pull away. She simply stood there, letting the boy's hand tug at her bag. Her calmness wasn't what they expected, and it unsettled them in a way they couldn't articulate. The crowd pressed in tighter, some students egging the bullies on, others watching with unease. The leader sneered and jerked the backpack harder, raising his voice for the audience. "Come on, say something. Or are you really just as weird and quiet as everyone thinks?" The courtyard buzzed with anticipation, the tension mounting. To everyone watching, it looked like the classic setup. A pack of bullies cornering the silent outsider, about to humiliate her in front of the entire school. The kids with phones leaned in, eager to capture the moment. What none of them realized, not the crowd, not even the bullies themselves, was that this was not going to go the way they thought. Because the new girl wasn't just quiet. She wasn't just mysterious. She was something far more dangerous. A fighter who knew exactly how to handle herself. And the mistake they had just made, grabbing her, cornering her, mocking her in front of everyone, was about to explode back in their faces. The boy holding her backpack thought he had all the control. His smirk deepened as the crowd thickened, cheers and jeers bubbling through the circle. He tugged her bag again, expecting resistance, maybe a stammer, maybe even tears. That was always the pattern. Push, corner, break down, win. But the new girl's eyes shifted. For the first time, she looked directly at him. Her stare wasn't frightened or pleading. It was sharp, focused, and unsettlingly calm. It made his laughter falter for just a second. He covered it with a louder jeer, tugging the strap harder. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue." In that split second, the entire atmosphere shifted. She moved. Her hand shot up like lightning, gripping his wrist with an iron strength no one expected. Gasps erupted as his face twisted in pain. The smirk dissolved, replaced by wide-eyed shock. She twisted his arm just enough to make him stumble forward, releasing her bag with a startled grunt. The crowd erupted in a chorus of disbelief. "What the?" he shouted, clutching his wrist, but she was already turning to the next one. The second bully lunged clumsily, eager to impress the crowd with his toughness. He swung his arm out in a wide arc, a lazy attempt at intimidation. The girl ducked effortlessly, her movement smooth and precise, and swept her leg out. His feet left the ground as if the pavement had betrayed him, and he crashed onto his back with a thud that rattled teeth around the circle. Students screamed, half in shock, half in exhilaration. Phones rose higher, recording every detail. This wasn't just another bullying incident. This was a reversal, a spectacle no one could have scripted. The third bully hesitated. He was bigger than the others, broader in the shoulders, but he'd just watched his friends get dismantled in seconds. His confidence wavered as she turned to face him. She wasn't out of breath. She wasn't flustered. She stood tall, relaxed, her fists lowered at her sides as though daring him to try. He spat on the ground, forcing bravado back into his posture. "You think you're tough. You don't know who you're messing with." His voice cracked slightly, betraying nerves. The crowd roared, fueling the tension. Some shouted for him to back off, others egged him on, hungry to see what happened. Next, he charged, trying to tackle her with brute force. The girl sidestepped with flawless timing, grabbing his arm as he barreled past. With a twist of her hips, she redirected his momentum and sent him sprawling into the ground face first. Dust puffed up around him as laughter and cheers erupted from the audience. The three bullies scrambled, disoriented, their arrogance shattered. Their leader tried to stand tall again, red-faced, fury twisting his expression. "This isn't over," he barked, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. The girl didn't respond. She simply took a step closer, her movements slow, deliberate, and terrifying in their composure. The leader flinched backward. The crowd caught it immediately, his fear. It was subtle, but in front of dozens of students and countless recording phones, it was devastating. "Get up," he hissed at his friends, but they were too busy dusting themselves off, groaning from the hits. None of them wanted to take another step toward her. The silence was deafening now. All the jeers, all the cruel laughter had dissolved into stunned awe. The only sounds were the ragged breaths of the bullies and the quiet hum of phones capturing history. The girl finally spoke, her voice low and steady, cutting through the air like a blade. "Next time, pick on someone who can't fight back." It wasn't shouted, it wasn't angry, it was calm. That calmness was more terrifying than anything else. She didn't need to brag. She didn't need to prove anything. She had already done it. The leader cursed under his breath and shoved past his friends, desperate to escape the ring of eyes staring at him. His swagger was gone, his smirk shattered. His crew followed, limping, heads down, slipping through the crowd that parted like water. For a long moment, no one moved. The girl stood in the center, her backpack slung back over her shoulder, golden light from the lowering sun catching in her hair. The circle of students stared at her like they were seeing something mythical. Then the cheers began. Not taunts, not laughter, cheers. Students clapped, some whistled, others shouted her name even though many hadn't known it minutes earlier. The energy flipped, and now she wasn't the quiet, mysterious new girl, she was a legend. But she didn't revel in it. She didn't pump her fist or shout in triumph. She simply gave the crowd one last steady glance and walked calmly through them, the sea of students parting to let her pass. Phones followed her, voices trailed her, but she didn't turn around. Every step she took away from the scene carved the lesson deeper into the minds of everyone watching. She wasn't the kind of person you messed with. And those who had tried had learned the hard way. The bullies thought they had found their next victim. What they found instead was a fighter they could never hope to beat. The courtyard still buzzed long after the bullies had limped away, their pride in tatters. Students lingered in tight circles, replaying the scene in animated voices, hands flying as they mimicked the girls' lightning-fast moves. Phones were out everywhere, screens glowing as clips spread like wildfire across group chats and social media pages. What had started as a tense silence had transformed into a storm of excitement, disbelief, and newfound respect. At the center of it all, the girl walked with measured steps toward the gate. She didn't hurry, but she didn't bask in the attention either. Her posture was upright, calm, as though what had just happened was nothing unusual. Golden light from the setting sun glowed across her shoulders, giving her a quiet aura of strength. Each time someone stepped out of her way, their eyes followed her, wide with a mix of awe and curiosity. Behind her, the whispers grew louder. "Did you see that takedown?" one boy exclaimed, replaying the moment on his phone to a group of friends. "She flipped him like it was nothing." Another voice chimed in, higher with excitement. "She didn't even break a sweat. It was like she was trained or something." Someone else added, half joking, half serious, "Maybe she's in the military or a secret martial arts master." The rumors took root instantly, each retelling adding flair. By the time she reached the edge of the courtyard, students who hadn't even been present were hearing exaggerated versions. She had taken down 5, maybe 6 bullies, one with a single glance, another with a punch that sent him flying. The legend was already being written, shaped by eager voices. And yet, she remained silent. She didn't turn back to correct them, didn't engage with the sudden flood of admiration. The same quiet demeanor that had made her a target now made her all the more mysterious. She let the noise swirl around her without acknowledging it, her eyes focused forward. The bullies, meanwhile, had vanished into the building, their humiliation palpable. Some kids laughed at the memory of their shocked faces, but others felt a flicker of sympathy. They weren't used to losing, and certainly not in front of everyone. But no one dared say it too loudly. The tide had shifted. Mocking the girl wasn't just unwise now, it was social suicide. As she stepped through the gates, a smaller group of students followed her at a distance, not wanting to intrude but unable to let go of the moment. A girl with braided hair whispered to her friend, she didn't even need to say much. "Just that one line, it gave me chills." They repeated it softly, as though quoting a movie hero. By the next morning, the story had spread beyond the courtyard. Teachers caught fragments of gossip in the hallways, raising their brows at mentions of a fight and unbelievable skills. In classrooms, heads bent together, phones hidden under desks replaying the grainy clips from every angle students had captured. Even those who usually ignored drama found themselves watching in silence. The sight of the quiet new girl dismantling the school's most feared bullies was mesmerizing. When she walked into school that day, the difference was immediate. Where before students might have ignored her or whispered behind her back, now they stepped aside respectfully, some nodding slightly as she passed. A few even offered shy greetings, though she responded with little more than a polite nod or a brief glance. She wasn't seeking popularity, and that aloofness only deepened her mystique. The bullies avoided her completely. They no longer lingered near her locker or made loud jokes as she passed. In fact, they seemed to vanish into the background, quieter than anyone could remember them being. Their reputations, once built on fear, had crumbled in a single afternoon. Over time, the girl's reputation grew beyond the fight. Teachers noticed her discipline, her ability to focus, her quiet leadership in group projects. Students began to admire her not just for her strength, but for her composure, the way she never flaunted her power. She became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that silence didn't mean weakness, that sometimes it hid the greatest strength of all. And though she rarely spoke about what had happened, The message was clear to everyone who had seen it or heard about it. Respect was something she commanded, not demanded. She hadn't sought out the fight, but when it came, she had handled it with precision, confidence, and control. The bully's mistake had been assuming her quiet meant helplessness. What they, and everyone else, had learned was that behind that silence was a fighter no one could break. From then on, whenever students whispered about her, it wasn't with ridicule or doubt. It was with admiration, a mix of curiosity and respect. She had walked into the school a shadow. Now, she was unforgettable.